What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an herbalist and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sending me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Thank you for hitting the save button in this corner. Thank you for sending it to a friend. Thank you for just being here. What a party it is to be here with the Zamboni Funk community. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this is the last week of February, and so some important things have taken place here. We've seen the sun has moved from Aquarius into Pisces. So this is really great for the sun. You know, for sun things, when we think about sun things, we can think about personal sovereignty a lot. I always talk about that. We can talk about the self, the source, the light, the thing inside you that wants to shine out into the world, this little light of mine. During Saturn or during Aquarius time, under the rulership of Saturn, conjunct Saturn, then Saturn wins. Saturn wins in that situation. You know what I mean? Saturn and the sun are opposite to each other. That's what they are. The sun rules Leo, and so to be an Aquarius opposite to Leo is like kind of a bummer for the sun. And so there's just a bit of like that has been kind of like happening with the sun, right? Like, okay, I guess that this is just how it is then, you know? Like, I guess this is just my life now. Fine. You know, has been a little bit of the way that the sun has felt for the last month or so. As the sun moves away from Saturn and moves toward Jupiter in Pisces, the sun is going to move into Pisces and is going to move into Jupiter's rulership. And then also Jupiter is in Pisces. So the sun is going to move into conjoin Jupiter. Not this week, but we're going to be moving closer to that. That looks really good for the sun, for feeling good about this little light of mine, for feeling good about self, for feeling like there's possibility, hope, you know, for not necessarily feeling weighted down by the burden of management and of, you know, like, oh, there's so much to do and all that sort of stuff, right? The sun is going to start to feel a lot better as far as that stuff is concerned. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot to do. There is a lot to do. And this is one of the things that we can see with Mars. So as the sun moves out of Aquarius, moves away from Saturn, then Saturn is going to emerge from under the beams of the sun. You can remember, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? I talked about being under the beams of the sun. You can't really see things when the sun is so bright that way, right? And so you can't see Saturn because Saturn is currently under the beams of the sun. This week, Saturn is going to emerge from the beams, while at the same time, Jupiter is going to move under the beams. So Saturn comes out and Jupiter goes in. So we're starting to see, so whenever a planet, even a planet who is at home in rulership, such as Saturn in Aquarius, a planet who is under the beams of the sun can't do a lot of external out here, this is the stuff that's going on sort of stuff, right? That's not how a planet can do things. Things turn inward in a Kazemi moment, or when a planet is combust the sun like that. It's a time to renew, to reevaluate the sort of core values of that planet, especially a planet at home in domicile, such as Saturn in Aquarius or Jupiter in Pisces. We're moving into that one. As Saturn moves out from under the beams, then we get some more of this outward, okay, we can do the Saturn things now. We can work toward organizational efficiency. We can work toward making sure that our habits and routines are really on point. Not just thinking with it in the way that the sun might do, but actually like boots on the ground, rubber hits the road. Like, how are we going to actually do it? This is especially true with Mars, who is in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. Mars, who is in Capricorn, which is the sign that Mars is exalted in. Mars does really well in Capricorn. Mars, who is in Capricorn with Venus, and so who is bona fide by that, who is empowered by this situation with Venus. Venus being with Mars is difficult for Venus, but very good for Mars, right? As we see this situation going on, then we can see that there's a lot of this Saturn stuff, the Capricorn Aquarius stuff, the dealing with boundaries, what is appropriately inside the boundary, what is appropriately outside of the boundary, how do we draw these boundaries, how can we appropriately maintain and enforce these boundaries, all of this sort of stuff, as well as what is it an appropriate way for me to manage my team, for example, or to manage my household, or to manage my children, or whatever it is, wherever you're Saturn, right? There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of energy to do that sort of stuff. The Mars is really going to be strong, and has been for the past, 4 weeks now or something like this, right? I've been talking about Mars in Capricorn as being a good Mars placement for a while here. This Mars placement improves when Saturn moves out from under the beams of the sun, because Saturn gets stronger, gets a little more resolute. There's a sense of like, okay, we've done this renewal, this reevaluation. We've got a better sense of how to do organizational management, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's time to go about actually doing that. So the Mars and Saturn, they look like they are, especially because they are not in aspect to one another, they're blind to each other. This looks actually pretty effective for getting a lot of stuff done. Mars and Saturn can get in each other's way. They can fight sometimes. They can sometimes, if they see a little too closely eye to eye, like we had Saturn in Capricorn and Mars in Capricorn 2 years ago, then it was a little too much. It was like, this is a lot of malefic energy, right? To see them in a place where they are both strong and able to handle their shit, but not step on each other's toes. This looks really effective. This is a very good week for getting in there and handling some difficult shit. Now, at the same time, the sun moving into Pisces is going to be a little difficult on the Jupiter stuff. We'll talk a little more about that as we get closer to a conjunction to Jupiter. Also check out the monthly forecast that I do with Bread and Butter. That is currently up on the Bread and Butter website. You can find that at the link in my bio, yada, yada. All that is there. So that deals a little more with the Jupiter going under the beams of the sun. Think about what I just said about Saturn, except reverse it. So we're going to see Jupiter moving toward that renewal, moving toward inward thought patterns and this sort of stuff. We'll talk more about that later. The other thing that is going on this week, so the sun moved out of Aquarius and into Pisces, and so that's going to give us a strong Saturn and a strong Mars, right? At the same time, Mercury is also in Aquarius and is moving quickly through Aquarius at this point. This is chip-chopping Mercury. Boot scooting, I think, is what my teacher likes to call that. This is Mercury moving as fast as Mercury likes to go. But in Aquarius. So Mercury is said to be strong in Aquarius, especially here with Saturn. This definitely looks like being very good at the kind of thinky, analytical, reasoning capacity, especially if we're thinking about Saturn as having problems to deal with, or having to engage organizational efficiency or something like this, right? Mercury is going to be very good at doing the organizing, at making the lists, at figuring out what needs to be done, and sort of analyzing it and organizing it into a stepwise progression that is actually achievable. Mercury is very good at doing this kind of thing, and is going to be not only under Saturn's rulership, but like very much just kind of like beholden to Saturn this week. Now, of course, being in Aquarius places Mercury in a square relationship to Uranus and Taurus. Now, so I've been thinking recently, I've got this talk coming up on Mercury. So on March 2nd, I'm going to be doing a talk with Nadia Shah's Synchronicity University. Make sure and check that out. It's going to be super fun. And I'm going to talk about Mercury, not only Mercury retrograde, which are all of the Mercury retrogrades this year are very interesting, but just kind of the basic nature of Mercury, which is trickstery. Mercury is the one who goes back and forth, who is in liminal space. Mercury is not one who is going to be reliably any one thing, and so we can think about this as resonating in some kind of way with Uranus and Taurus. And so we see how the tricky stuff wants to show up here, and that Mercury, who is with Saturn, wants to sort of like, there's a square relationship, there's conflict, there's tension, there's difficulty between Saturn and Uranus. That's the basic layout of what we're doing all year this year, also all year last year, right? So there's the organizational efficiency that wants to beef with liberation, with revolution, with things changing unexpectedly, suddenly, with value systems changing, this sort of stuff, right? Mercury this time is going to be on the side of Saturn. And so it's going to really insist on organizational efficiency. It's going to really insist on maybe the official story in whatever way it is, right? Mercury is very strongly caught up in story and narrative and communication of words and this kind of thing, or communication of ideas using words and word choice and this sort of stuff, right? So we can see that the Mercury is going to have some difficulty alongside that Uranus. But if Uranus is playing tricks on Saturn, Saturn doesn't do well with playing tricks. Saturn is very serious. Saturn requires that you care deeply, that you take things very seriously, right? And so Uranus playing tricks on that really puts a bee into Saturn's bonnet. You know what I mean? It just it ruffles Saturn so fucking much. Whereas Mercury, I feel like, is going to be willing to respond in kind. It's like, okay, I see your trick and I raise you a trick. You know what I mean? And so I would definitely expect some trickiness happening from the authoritative side of things. I would think that it's not just rebels who are able to play tricks, right? Also, officials can play tricks on the rebels. And especially if the rebels aren't paying attention, then that can sort of hit them that can really sideswipe somebody. And so that's something to pay attention to. If you're in a Saturnian position, then how can you maybe flip the tables or turn things around such that you are back into a position of authority and to where, one of the things that we've seen with the authorities recently is that they haven't been getting as much respect as they would like or need to in order to operate efficiently or whatever, right? And so many of us have been on the rebellious side and have been like, yeah, stick it to the man. But then many of us are also trying to manage teams or manage households or whatever. And so we need a certain bit, we need people to respect us in order that we can give orders properly and this kind of thing, right? And so what kind of ways can you think outside of your regular old iron fist style, like I said so and therefore it is true kind of situation? How can we think with question marks? How can we think with, tricks or games or commerce or, the Mercury things? How can we think with that in order to generate a little more Saturnian authority in the areas where we need it? This is a good question to think with this week. Thank you so much for being here. As always, if you are digging it, please send me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. That is super, super helpful. You can always get a reading with me. And if any of this you want to see how this is affecting your own natal chart and life, and you want some tips on how to work with that, how strategies to work with in the future, I do readings. Check out the talk that I'm going to do with Nadia Shaw's Synchronicity University. If you sign up before the 28th of February, then you can choose your own tuition rate. So you can get in for whatever price you choose. That's happening on March 2nd, which is only a couple of days after that. That's on the new moon in Pisces as well. So that'll be a fun time. What else have I forgotten to plug? Probably all of it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this community and for checking for me all the time. I super appreciate y'all. Y'all are a beautiful community. I love you so much. Looking forward to seeing y'all next time. Have a good week.